Tirol in Buffalo. By accident, somebody left a wooden crate in which oranges are delivered in the baking part of the oven last night, and in the morning it was toasted without being burned. It was made of thin pine wood, and when I came into the kitchen I felt heartsick because it smelled just like my sawmill in Tirol. When I close my eyes and smell a little piece of wood which I have broken off the crate, I can see the mill, the road that leads to it, and the water that comes through the roof. This water runs along the narrow wooden river that is carried along on heavy beams and sometimes built onto strong trees. This is done to keep it high and then give the water much drop, so that when a wooden partition is pulled out, it shoots down through the roof onto the wheel that is 30 feet high and begins to turn it. Not all the water goes that way. Some of it is left below in the bed of the brook. This water is crystal clear. The bed is covered with fine sand, ferns and water plants stand in it, and little lizards, jet black with flaming carmine patches. Also, many frogs, green as grass, with golden eyes, and little fishes live there. In the valley stand the highest pines. The road winds in and out of the mountains on the mountainside. Only teams of oxen can go along to drag the heavy loads. They are slow but much stronger than horses, and the wagons that they pull have two little wheels in front and long beams that drag along and act as a brake because the road is very steep and always changes up and down. Over the entrance of the mill is a statue of the Lord. He sits resting his chin in his arm and is very sad. The statue, like all Christuses along the road, and there are many of them, is the work of a peasant artist. The artists have made the Christuses so earnestly that the suffering they themselves felt has gone over into the wood. They carve on them their own faces, and they are beautiful, honest, simple, and look sorry for the whole world. The design is not always good. The dimensions are wrong. Sometimes they are a little too fat, or the legs are not long enough, and the part from the knee to the ankle is very hard for them to carve. Because of this, the statues are humble, and each one with his little house around it, which is seen only in Tyrol and Austria, is a private, different Christus, and much stronger than the good heroic ones that are too beautiful and too much alike. At the base of these Christuses are flowers from the fields that peasants put there, the lovely yellow cowslips, blue gentians, crocuses, willows, and in winter pine branches. The trees hereabout, and they are almost all pines, are free of branches almost to the top. This is because the peasants are poor. They cut the branches up to a height of 30 feet, trim the wood in the center for fire, and use the small ends with the needles for the stables. That is why the stables here smell so lovely. No one believes me that the cattle on the high mountains have much more intelligent faces than the valleys. This is also true of the people, even in their dialect. In the narrow valleys they are sullen and gruff and hardly speak. Up above is more sun, lighter air, high voices, and much room, and they are happier, sing and dance, and the cattle, grazing along dangerous precipices, must think more. The oxen and the cows have serious and beautiful faces. They are also in better construction and much cleaner. The finest place to see all this is on the hill in the back of the mill, with the water flowing into the roof and coming out as spray below, with the sound of the wheel turning. From here a whole world can be seen. Houses far below, little and littler, a church on the mountain opposite with a tower sharp as the point of a pencil, its bells clearly heard. Behind it, soaring into the sky, is the ring of mountains that change color all day long, and are glowing purple and carmine when the sun sets. All this I see with a little piece of wood under my nose. I could even ride back to the hotel with it, and see the German tourists who always stand in groups after they have written postal cards, and argue about the names of the mountains. They do that with printed panoramas in their hand, pointing, and get very mad. They don't believe even our head waiter, and look into the Baedeker to see if he is right about the height of each mountain. The cogwheel railroad that runs from Bozen up to Ritten, to the last station, which is Klobenstein, has an electric locomotive. The car is a streetcar, really, that runs through Bozen and up on the mountain under its own power, and when it takes the long, steep mountain climb, the little locomotive gets behind it, and a man attaches 3 different safety couplings. Then the conductor blows a little trumpet that sounds "bah," and the car tilts upward, and slowly it moves up, very slowly. I have found out that when I call long distance on the telephone, the same sound as that on the locomotive, a howling electric noise, is heard. Therefore, when I get very homesick, instead of forgetting about it, I call long distance to hear this and hang up. I think if anybody would find out in this place about the little piece of pine wood which I hear and smell when the long distance calls for no purpose, I might have difficulty. When the danger of the worst kind, then my safest island. When the danger is of the worst kind, then my safest island is Uncle Joseph. He cannot hear. He is up on the mountain, and a simple peasant priest, and people from far away come to him because he is so good, and to confess to him because it is much easier. He watches their lips and forgives everything when they stop talking. He has a little dog of no race, salt and pepper colored, with short legs, ears like a bat, and a face like a very old, disgusted man. With this dog, Uncle Joseph takes his daily prayer walk, with a little book out of which he reads. He always carries an umbrella that swings in back of him, as if he had wheels inside, and it were a pendulum. He speaks little, I think, because he feels that nobody can hear him either, but when he speaks, he says everything very loud. Mostly he speaks with his eyes. He must be 70 years old, but he is very hale, and sometimes, for no reason on a long walk, he skips and jumps a few steps, and then turns about to smile. He has permission from the Pope to wear a beard, because he has a goiter, but in Tirol a goiter is something almost to be proud of, because all the peasants have them, and therefore speak with a deep basso. The dog is also very old. He does not go to trees any more, and when he has to stop, he just spreads his 4 legs with his little belly on the ground and makes water, and doing this, his lips tremble and he looks more miserable than he does all the time. When Uncle Joseph sees a little flower along the road, he stops and silently points at it, or at a bird in the air, and again smiles. He is a holy man. On Sunday, in his little church, he preaches, and when a peasant comes in late, he stops the sermon and speaks to him from the pulpit, and it is the only time I know that he gets mad. He points up to the ceiling of the church and speaks for the Father in heaven and says, "Franzel, where have you been again?" The peasant is then ashamed and hides behind a pillar, and after the service, when Uncle Joseph walks through the church with holy water and a silver-handled brush to bless them, he takes an extra-large dip and rains it on the peasant. Uncle Joseph has other troubles. He has very little money. He lives plainly. All he can spare he gives to the poor or to many causes. Another is the painting of the Christuses. There is a very good religious man with a beautiful white beard who is a house painter and a carpenter, and he has also to go around during the year and paint the many statues so they will not be eaten by the strong air, the heavy snow, and the cold. This man tries very hard to do this right, and when one watches him paint, he mirrors the face of the statue on his own. He is so deeply attached to this work. He does it the way children paint, with his mouth tightly closed, but unfortunately he is a very bad artist. First of all, he mixes a terrible color for the statues. It is too red, and sickly red, as in a fever, or too pale yellowish, and then the worst thing is that, when he comes to the face, he sometimes makes the eyes not right. All his Christuses have bad eyes. Some of them are cross-eyed, and others look away to both sides at the same time. And then he cannot make the mouth sad. This is very bad, because some of the Christuses almost smile. When Uncle Joseph comes to a newly painted one after he has removed his hat, which on warm days he carries on a clip in a buttonhole in front of his chest, he points at it and shakes his head, but he is too kind to say anything to that man, or have someone else do it. On these walks, little girls in wide skirts and flaxen hair come running out of houses, and may curtsy and kiss his hand. And they say, "Praise to God in heaven," and Uncle Joseph blesses them with his hand on their hair and answers, "In eternity, amen." This fills me always with an inner trembling and a warm love for him, and although I cannot believe in his religion, in the evenings when he goes through the deep forests to a dying peasant, and in his folded arms carries the host, the altar boy ahead of him, swinging a little lamp and ringing a silver bell, then I know with certainty, more than I know anything, that he is of God. And that's the end of Tyrol and Buffalo.